Imagine discovering that your marriage, the one you built with such care, is hanging by a thread. And the only way to know the truth is by risking everything. I always believed that love was a choice. Something to be cultivated every day, even when the passion became predictable, even when the years dulled the fire of the beginning. And for a long time, that belief kept me firmly by Daniel's side. Our marriage was solid, stable, maybe too stable. Daniel used to be the man who made me laugh late into the night, who kissed me in the grocery store line as if no one else were around. But over time, the kisses became monotonous, the touches scarce. He was still a good husband. There was no cheating, no explosive fights. There was only silence. And the silence was killing me. I tried everything. Surprise dinners, trips, new lingerie that he barely noticed. Until one day, sitting in my car, watching him from a distance at the cafe where he used to work before becoming a successful lawyer, I asked myself, if another woman flirted with him, would he resist? The question gnawed at me for days, not out of fear of the answer, but for what it meant. I needed to know. I needed to see with my own eyes if he still desired me, or if our marriage was already a ghost of what it once was. That's how the idea was born. First, as a passing thought. Then, as a dangerous plan. Impossible to ignore. I would hire someone to seduce him. Not for him to cheat on me, but to test him. To test us both. If he resisted, perhaps there was hope. Perhaps the problem was just the routine, and I could still bring him back to me. But if he gave in, then there would be nothing left to save. And I needed to know before it was too late. I knew exactly what I was looking for. It couldn't be just any woman. If it were someone like me, someone with a predictable life, responsibilities, and a marriage at stake, then the test wouldn't work. Daniel needed to be challenged by something he no longer had in me, something that, over time, I had left behind. He needed to be confronted with the temptation of everything I was no longer: young, free, dangerous. I spent days watching, analyzing, calculating. I couldn't trust this mission to just anyone. I needed someone who knew how to play, who understood the rules, but at the same time wouldn't hesitate to break them if necessary. That's how I found her. Her name was Ivy. I first saw Ivy in a sophisticated bar downtown. She was sitting alone at the counter, swirling a glass of whiskey between her fingers, as if she were waiting for something interesting to happen that night. She wore a fitted black dress, but not too flashy, and her hair fell in a deliberately messy and perfectly casual way. She wasn't just beautiful. She knew she was beautiful. And more than that, she knew how to be seen. The way she slowly crossed her legs, how she threw brief glances and studied the environment without rushing. She wasn't there for just anyone. She was there to be chosen. And that night, I was the one who chose her. "You don't seem like the type to sit alone in bars," I said, sliding into the seat next to her. Ivy smiled slyly, taking her time. Her blue eyes lingered on mine long enough to make me uncomfortable. "And you don't seem like the type to approach strangers without a good reason." She was sharp, direct, maybe even a little dangerous, but that was exactly what I needed. I ordered 2 drinks and got straight to the point. There was no reason for beating around the bush. "I want to pay you to seduce my husband." Ivy blinked slowly, then let out a short laugh. "That's a strange fetish." "It's not a fetish, it's a test." If she thought it was bizarre, she didn't show it. She just tilted her head, assessing the situation with genuine curiosity. "Does he know he's being tested?" "Of course not." She bit her lip, thoughtful. "And what if he fails?" I swallowed hard. I didn't want to think about that. Not yet. Then I need to know. I need to know if he still desires me. For a moment, I thought Ivy would refuse, that she would laugh at my proposal and leave me alone with my madness. But then, her lips curved into a slow smile, full of secrets. "All right, I'm in." "Why?" She took a sip of her whiskey, then rested her elbow on the counter, staring at me with a challenging glint in her eyes. "Money, of course. But besides that, I'm curious. I want to see how far this can go." I should have worried about that answer. About how easily she accepted. But at that moment, all that mattered was that the plan was in motion. The game had begun. It didn't take long for Ivy to enter the game. I watched her from a distance, like a director watching her play unfold on stage. At first, everything seemed calculated. Little casual encounters, subtle collisions, a smile exchanged at the right moment. The first time they saw each other was at the gym Daniel frequented. I knew because Ivy sent me a short message. First contact made. He noticed me. My heart raced. I shouldn't have been anxious. This was part of the plan. But the thought of another woman entering Daniel's world, sharing his spaces, capturing his attention, made me restless. The second encounter happened at the cafe near his office. I sat a few tables behind, a newspaper open in front of me just to disguise. She walked in minutes later, confident, but not over the top. Her hair was tied in a loose bun, a slightly open white shirt at the collar, and tight jeans that accentuated her curves. The kind of look that said, "I don't try hard to be sexy," but was exactly what caught attention. I saw when Daniel's eyes passed over her. It was quick, maybe a reflex, but I knew him too well not to notice. Ivy ordered her coffee, and as she picked up the cup, she pretended that bumping into his arm was an accident. "Oh, sorry," she said with a slightly embarrassed smile. Daniel looked up, surprised. "It's fine." I almost laughed. My husband was always polite but formal. With me, with coworkers, with anyone. He wasn't the type to flirt with strangers in cafes, but Ivy didn't let his reserved demeanor intimidate her. "Do you come here often?" she asked. He hesitated, as if trying to decipher the intention behind the question. "Yeah, more or less." Ivy fiddled with the coffee lid. "Me too. But I've never seen you before. Hard not to notice someone like you." The compliment caught Daniel off guard. I held my breath. He laughed, half uncomfortable, half flattered. Was that a pickup line? Ivy smiled, stepping back as if she was evaluating him. "It depends. Do you want it to be?" I sensed the tension in his response, even without hearing it. Just a corner smile, a look that lingered longer than it should before he finally said, "Good morning to you," and walked away. I was frozen. I couldn't tell if it left me relieved or even more unsettled. He didn't bite the bait, yet. But Ivy had achieved something more important. She had planted doubt. That night when he got home, I watched him as he loosened his tie and grabbed a glass of water in the kitchen. "How was your day?" I asked casually. He shrugged. "The usual. Work, gym, coffee. Nothing. No mention of the girl who bumped into him, the one who gave him a teasing smile. We made love that night, for the first time in weeks." And as he slid his hands over my body, I wondered, was it for me? Or was it because another woman reminded him he could still be desired? I didn't know the answer, but for the first time, I felt fear about what I had started. The change in Daniel was subtle, too small to be a coincidence, but big enough to leave me restless. He was different. That morning, as we had coffee, he picked up his phone and smiled at the screen. A brief smile, almost imperceptible, but I noticed. "What's that?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "Nothing, just an email from the office." He lied. I knew. Daniel hated office emails. I didn't confront him. I just observed. And that's what I did in the following days, while Ivy continued her work. She wasn't aggressive. She didn't need to be. She was everywhere he went, but never in an obvious way. A bump at the gym, a shared glance in the elevator, a smile at the cafe before he hurried away. And I saw everything. I saw how, at first, he didn't pay attention, how he ignored it, how he was just a married man, accustomed to routine, not realizing he was being hunted. But then something changed. His gaze started to search for her. At the gym, he noticed when she arrived. His eyes followed her for a second longer before returning to the weights. At the cafe, he noticed the way she absent-mindedly played with the necklace she wore around her neck, the lips she bit unconsciously while reading on her phone. I knew Daniel. I could recognize when he was intrigued, and he was. But the worst part was realizing something I didn't expect. I was too. I should have felt pain, jealousy, anger. But there was something else in the mix, something that was eating away at me from the inside out. Fascination. I watched Ivy the same way Daniel did. I saw the way she smiled to the side, the way she slowly crossed her legs when sitting down. She wasn't just seducing my husband. She was pulling me into this game too, and I didn't know how to stop. The first time Ivy and I found ourselves alone since the agreement happened by chance. Or at least, that's what I thought. I was at the cafe where Daniel met her without realizing. I ordered a cappuccino and sat at the farthest table, lost in my thoughts, when her voice sounded behind me. "If you keep watching me like that, I'm going to think you're more obsessed with me than with him." I looked up and found those blue eyes, filled with something I still couldn't name. She wore a loose sweater, her hair tied casually, as if she hadn't tried to be noticed. But even so, it was impossible to ignore her. "Sit down," I said, trying to sound firm. She complied without hesitation, a small smile playing on her lips. "He's giving in," she said, straightforwardly. My stomach twisted. "What do you mean?" Ivy took a sip of the coffee she had brought as if we were talking about the weather. "He notices me now. Before, he just saw some random woman bumping into him. Now he looks for me. He likes the attention." A knot tightened in my throat. "But has he done anything?" She shrugged. "No, not yet. But he thinks about me. You feel that, don't you?" I did. Every distracted glance from Daniel, every brief smile at his phone, every moment of hesitation when I called him and he took a second longer to respond. But what bothered me the most wasn't that. It was the fact that Ivy seemed more interested in me than in him. There was something in the way she looked at me, as if I were the real puzzle she wanted to solve. "Why did you do this?" she suddenly asked. I blinked. "What?" "All of this. The plan. You could have just asked him, or ended the marriage. But instead, you wanted to test." "Why?" I tried to find a simple answer, but there wasn't one. "I needed to know," I murmured. Ivy tilted her head, studying me. "And if, in the end, you discover something about yourself that you weren't expecting?" My breath caught. She knew. Somehow she knew that the game I created was no longer about Daniel. It was about me. And in that moment, I realized that I had lost control. Daniel was changing. I could see it in the details, in the way he looked at me with more attention, in the touch that lingered a second longer before releasing my waist, in the kisses that started happening again for no reason, and not just as part of the routine. If I hadn't known the truth, I would have believed that our marriage was finally waking up after years of dormancy. But I knew. I knew that the change hadn't come from me, and that ate away at me. That night, while he was in the shower, I grabbed his phone. My hands trembled, but not from the fear of finding an obvious betrayal. Daniel wasn't that kind of man. My greatest fear was finding unfulfilled desire, unread messages, a saved name that shouldn't be there, any trace that he thought of her the same way I did. But there was nothing, and that frustrated me even more, because deep down I knew. I knew that betrayals don't start with written words, they start with a persistent thought, with the desire to find someone in places where no one was sought before, and Daniel was already at that point. "You're different," I murmured when he came out of the shower, a towel draped around his hips. He looked at me through the reflection in the mirror, running his hand through his damp hair. "Different how?" "I don't know. Just different." He turned to face me, studying me as if trying to decipher something. "Is that a good thing or a bad thing?" I tried to smile. "You're more present." He stepped closer, stopping in front of me. His fingers touched my face, tracing a slow path down to my collarbone. "Isn't that what you wanted?" I wanted, but I wanted it to be because of me. I closed my eyes when he kissed me, when his hands roamed my body with a hunger that hadn't existed before. And for a moment, I surrendered to the illusion. But deep down, I knew it wasn't real. Because while he touched me with renewed intensity, I could only think of her. I didn't know how I got there. It was late. The kind of night where the street seemed emptier and the silences heavier. Ivy was waiting for me at the bar where it all began. A forgotten drink on the table, her eyes analyzing me as if she already knew the reason for my presence. But I didn't know. I just knew I needed to see her. "To what do I owe the honor?" she asked, a smile playing on her lips. This was a mistake. The words came out before I could filter them. I was breathless, as if I had run there. Perhaps I had, in some way. Ivy tilted her head, studying me. What exactly was a mistake? I closed my eyes, trying to organize my thoughts, but all I could see was Daniel. Daniel looking at me differently. Daniel kissing me with desire. Daniel touching me with the excitement of someone who had rediscovered something lost. Only it wasn't him I saw when my mind wandered to dangerous places. It was her. I wanted him to desire me again, I admitted, my voice coming out quieter than I expected. But I didn't expect this. Ivy watched me for a moment, then let out a short laugh. Oh, darling, you really didn't realize, did you? Realize what? She leaned forward, closing the space between us. My fingers curled around the glass as if they needed something to hold on to. You didn't do this to test him, Ivy whispered. You did this to test yourself. My heart raced. That's not true. She raised an eyebrow. No? Then why are you here? I could have said so many things. That I wanted her to stop. That I needed to end this. That I was trying to save my marriage. But none of those answers were entirely true. And it was in that moment, that small second of hesitation, that Ivy touched me. Her hand slid to my thigh, a slow and unhurried gesture. My whole body tensed, but I didn't pull away. She noticed. And then it happened. It was subtle, an almost imperceptible movement. A gaze held for too long, a slight tilt of her head. A space that was closing until it no longer existed. Her lips touched mine. It was a brief kiss. Just a test. A tease. But when she pulled away, I couldn't breathe. Because in that instant, I knew. The game I had created was out of my control. And I no longer knew who was testing whom. I left the bar as if I were running away. The cold night air hit my face, but it wasn't enough to dissipate the heat still burning beneath my skin. My lips tingled. My heart hammered in a chaotic rhythm, as if trying to tell me something I didn't want to hear. That shouldn't have happened. But it did. I couldn't stop reliving the moment. The way Ivy hadn't hesitated. How she looked at me before kissing me, as if she already knew I wouldn't pull away. Because I didn't pull away. I drove home without remembering the way. My hands trembled on the wheel, my chest rising and falling too quickly. When I entered the apartment, Daniel was already on the sofa, barefoot, with a forgotten book in his lap. He looked up at me and smiled. You took a while. My mouth went dry. He had no idea what was happening inside me, what I had done. I dropped my bag harder than I should have and went to the kitchen, opening the refrigerator just to have something to do with my hands. I felt Daniel approach, his warm body behind me. Are you okay? He asked, his fingers brushing my waist. I closed my eyes. He was here. He wanted me. I should focus on that. But Ivy was stuck in my mind. You wanted to test his desire, she had whispered against my mouth. But what about yours? Yeah, I lied, grabbing a glass of water. I'm just tired. He didn't seem convinced, but he didn't insist. He just pulled me by the waist and kissed my neck, his warm breath against my skin. And for the first time in years, I pulled back. Daniel felt it. He froze for a second before pulling away slightly. What's wrong? I shook my head, forcing a smile. Nothing. I just need a shower. I didn't wait for a response. I just went into the room, closed the door, and leaned against it, trying to calm the storm inside me. The problem was that, for the first time, I wasn't sure if I wanted it to stop. I was falling apart. In the following days, I did everything to act as if nothing had changed, as if I didn't wake up in the middle of the night with the taste of Ivy still in my mouth, as if Daniel wasn't becoming increasingly aware of my silences, of my distant looks. But he noticed. Daniel had always been observant. He was the type who noticed when I changed my perfume, when my mood shifted after a bad day at work. So of course he noticed. The moment of truth came without warning. We were in the kitchen, a mundane setting for what should have been a normal night. I was chopping vegetables for dinner. Daniel was pouring himself a glass of wine. Everything was as usual, except it wasn't. Who is she? He suddenly asked. The knife slipped from my hand, hitting the cutting board with a dull sound. My heart froze. What? Daniel didn't take his eyes off mine. There's someone on your mind. I can see it in your eyes. You're here, but you're not here. The air felt heavier. I could lie. I could laugh, pretend to be indignant, roll my eyes and ask if he was becoming paranoid. But something in his expression stopped me. He wasn't angry. He was hurt. I swallowed hard. Do you think I'm cheating on you? He leaned his hands on the counter, exhaling slowly. I don't know what to think, but I feel like I'm losing you. The words hit my chest like a blow, because for the first time, he was right. I wanted to say it was madness, that it was a mistake, that I didn't feel anything for Ivy. But if that were true, why was I trembling? Why was my heart racing as if it were about to collapse in confession? Claire. He whispered my name, taking a step forward. His fingers brushed against my hand, warm, familiar. What's happening to us? His eyes searched mine as if pleading for an answer. But I didn't have one. And for the first time, I was afraid that the truth would destroy me. I didn't answer, because I had no way to respond. Daniel waited, his eyes locked on mine, the weight of the question hanging in the air between us. But in the end, when he realized I had nothing to say, he just let out a tired sigh and walked out of the kitchen. He didn't insist, and that hurt more than if he had shouted. I spent the rest of the night sitting on the couch, staring into nothing while Ivy's words echoed in my head. What if, in the end, you discover something about yourself that you weren't expecting? The answer was already in front of me. I just didn't want to accept it. What started as a test for Daniel had become a test for me. I wanted him to fail. I wanted him to give in to Ivy's seduction so that I would have a concrete reason to justify what I felt, the fact that something inside me was changing. But he didn't give in. I did. And now, no one wanted Ivy to leave. Not Daniel. Not me. Not her. I needed to see her. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe I was about to destroy myself, but it didn't matter. I drove without thinking, without rehearsing words, just following the desperate impulse to understand what, exactly, was happening to me. When I knocked on Ivy's apartment door, my heart was in chaos. She opened seconds later, surprised to see me there. Not surprised that I had come, but perhaps surprised it had taken me so long. Claire. She tilted her head, a subtle smile playing on her lips. I thought you were trying to avoid me. I took a deep breath, trying to ignore the shiver that ran down my spine, hearing my name come from her lips. I need this to end. Ivy crossed her arms, leaning against the door. This what? Her look was a challenge. And I hate to admit that, for a moment, I considered stepping through that door and finding out what would happen if I didn't back down. But I couldn't. My marriage was at stake. My whole life was falling apart. And in the midst of it all, there was Ivy. She knew that. Knew I was torn. That no matter how much my mouth said, this needs to end, my body was saying something else. Do you want me to go? She asked, her voice low, laden with something that made my chest ache. I didn't answer, because deep down, I knew the truth. I didn't want to. But what would happen if I admitted it? I could have lied. I could have said I wanted her to go, that this was all a mistake, that I needed to save my marriage. But I couldn't, because it wasn't true. So instead of answering, I did what I always did when I didn't know how to handle my own feelings. I ran. I turned my back and left Ivy's building without looking back. I spent the next few days trying to act as if nothing had happened. As if I were still the same woman who had started this game, believing I had control over the rules. But Daniel knew. He felt my distance, my silence. And worse, I felt his. His gaze was now different. Observant. Attentive. As if he were trying to decipher me. As if he were searching for clues about what was happening to me. And then one night, while we were in bed, he caught me off guard. Claire. I turned to face him, my heart racing for no apparent reason. Yes? He hesitated for a moment and then asked, with a calmness that startled me, Do you love someone who isn't me? The question hit me like a shock, because he didn't ask if I was in love. He didn't ask if I was cheating. He asked about love. And I didn't know how to respond, because the truth was that I still loved him. But there was also something more. Something that shouldn't exist. Something that was growing without permission. Something that haunted me in moments when I thought I was alone in my own thoughts. Ivy. She was there. In the spaces between the unspoken words. In the silences that screamed louder than any answer. So, I did what I always did. I ran away again. I looked away, swallowed hard and murmured, "No." Daniel studied my face as if searching for cracks in my lie. And by the way, he took a deep breath before turning to the other side of the bed. I knew he had found them. I shouldn't have gone to her. But I did. It was almost midnight when I parked in front of Ivy's apartment. I stayed in the car for long minutes, my fingers gripping the steering wheel, my head a mess. I could back up. I could go home, to Daniel, to the life I was destroying with my own hands. But instead, I got out of the car. Every step toward her door felt like a mistake. But then Ivy opened it, and any trace of logic disappeared. She was barefoot, wearing an oversized sweater that slipped off one shoulder, revealing the thin strap of a top underneath. Her hair was tied up in a messy bun, no makeup, no effort to be seductive, and yet it was impossible not to notice every detail about her. "Claire," she murmured, surprised but not stepping back. I held my breath. This needs to end. She leaned against the doorframe, crossing her arms, studying me with those eyes that always seemed to see too much. "So why are you here?" My throat went dry. "I don't know." Ivy let out a low sigh, almost a laugh, and then stepped back, opening space for me to enter. And I went in. I shouldn't have entered, but I did. I don't know how long we sat there on her couch, staring at our own silences. "He knows, doesn't he?" Ivy finally asked. My chest tightened. "He feels it." She nodded, as if she already knew the answer. "Do you still love him?" I closed my eyes for a second, trying to understand the confusion inside me. "Yes." "And what about me?" My breath faltered. I opened my mouth to deny it, to say she was just an unexpected consequence of my own plan, a mistake that should never have happened. But my voice wouldn't come out. Ivy noticed. She leaned forward, her eyes locked on mine, and whispered, "What if I don't want to leave?" My heart stopped. Because at that moment, I realized that maybe I didn't want to either. I came home too late. The city was silent, wrapped in a darkness that matched the mess inside me. My hands trembled on the steering wheel, my thoughts echoing like a dead-end maze. And at the center of it all was Daniel. When I entered the apartment, he was waiting for me. Not in bed, as I had expected. Not on the couch, pretending to have fallen asleep watching TV. He was in the kitchen, sitting at the table, a half-full glass of whiskey in front of him, and a look that cut through me like a blade. My stomach churned. "Where were you?" His voice was calm. There was no anger, and that was worse. I could have lied. I could have said I went for a drive to clear my head, that I needed some time alone. But deep down, I knew he already knew. So I remained silent. Daniel let out a heavy sigh and ran his hand over his face as if gathering strength to continue. "How long?" he asked. My throat went dry. "What? How long have you been testing me?" I closed my eyes, the weight of guilt crushing my chest. "Since the beginning." Daniel let out a bitter laugh. He didn't seem surprised. Just tired. "I knew something was wrong," he said, more to himself than to me. "At first you seemed distant. Then you seemed obsessed. And then, suddenly, you started wanting me again." He lifted his gaze, trapping me in his line of sight. But it wasn't for me, was it? My whole body tensed. Daniel had always been smart. He always knew how to read me better than I could myself. But I didn't expect him to get so close to the truth. He rested his elbows on the table, intertwining his fingers. "I should be furious," he admitted. "But all I feel is curiosity." I blinked, surprised. "Curiosity?" He nodded slowly. "I want to understand. I want to know who you are now." The words caught in my throat. Because for the first time, I realized that maybe I didn't know the answer either. Daniel didn't shout. He didn't accuse me. He didn't ask for explanations I didn't know how to give. He just sat there, watching me, as if he were trying to decipher the woman in front of him. A woman who was no longer the same, and I didn't know if that scared me or relieved me. "Do you love me?" he asked, his voice low and firm. My answer was instant. Yes. He nodded as if he needed to confirm that truth before continuing. "But it's not just about me, is it?" My chest tightened. "No." The word came out in a whisper, almost a confession. Daniel's eyes didn't leave mine. He took a deep breath, as if weighing every possibility, every choice. "So, what do we do now?" It was a question I hadn't expected. I thought he would hate me, that he would throw me out, that he would make everything easier with an explosion of anger, with a definitive decision. But instead, he gave me a choice, and I didn't know what to do with it. "Can we pretend nothing happened?" I murmured, uncertain. He let out a brief laugh without humor. "That's no longer an option." I swallowed hard. "We can separate. Each go our own way." Daniel nodded slowly. "We can." But there was something in the way he looked at me that said this wasn't the option he wanted either. And then the last possibility hung in the air between us. What would happen if we accepted that love doesn't have to follow rules? That desire doesn't fit into perfect boxes? Maybe there was something new waiting for us. If we had the courage to explore? I saw that thought cross Daniel's eyes. And I realized that for the first time, I wasn't the only one tempted to find out. The idea was there. Not spoken out loud, but present. Daniel was looking at me differently now. Not like someone who had been betrayed, but like someone trying to understand a new reality, one that he may have never considered before. And me? I was torn between fear and the excitement of the unknown. "Do you want me to choose?" I asked, my voice sounding more hesitant than I wanted. Daniel took a deep breath, his eyes darkening with something I couldn't decipher. "I want you to be honest. With me. With yourself." My throat went dry. Honesty. But how could I be honest about something I barely understood? I loved Daniel. That hadn't changed. But now I knew that love and desire were not the same thing. That what I felt for Ivy didn't erase what I felt for him. That, maybe, it was possible to want more without losing what was already mine. But did Daniel see that too? Or were we just heading toward inevitable destruction? Before I could respond, my phone vibrated. "Ivy. Meet me." My chest tightened. Daniel glanced at the screen for a second, then back at me. He didn't ask who it was. He didn't need to. And that's when I realized. The decision was no longer just mine. It was ours. The car was parked in front of Ivy's apartment. My hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, as if that could prevent the truth from swallowing me whole. I knew that if I climbed those stairs, nothing would ever be the same again. But did I want it to go back to what it was? I looked to the side. Daniel was there. Not at home, waiting for an answer I would never give. Not running from the situation, or demanding that I choose between him and what I felt for Ivy. He was by my side. And that changed everything. He stroked his chin thoughtfully, gazing at the building entrance as if trying to see what awaited us inside. "If we go to her," he began, carefully choosing his words, "there will be no turning back." I swallowed hard. I know. Silence settled between us, heavy with possibilities. If we stayed in the car, if we backed up and returned home, maybe we could reclaim what had once been ours. But would it be real? Or just a desperate attempt to pretend we were still the same people we once were? Daniel turned his face to me, his gaze intense, unwavering. "Do you want to go?" The question was so simple, but the answer wasn't. I loved him. I still loved him. But Ivy made me question everything, made me feel alive in a way I didn't even know I needed. And somehow Daniel knew that too. I let out a long sigh, feeling the weight of the choice before me. There was no right or wrong. There was no safe path. There were just the three of us, trapped in this triangle of desire, confusion, and love. And regardless of the decision we made now, nothing would ever be the same. And you? What would you do in Claire's place? Share your theories about what happens next. Do they go in? Do they go back home? And more importantly, can love really not follow rules? And don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel.